Hello everyone, and welcome to Vale of Hearts, a place where love and danger often share the same heartbeat. She wasn't looking for salvation that night. She just wanted to survive. The rain was heavy, the road endless, and her past too close behind. Then one call changed everything. A stranger's voice, low and steady, offering safety she didn't believe in. He was the kind of man people whispered about, the kind who lived in shadows and trusted nothing. But when he heard her fear, something in him stirred, something human he thought he'd lost. What began as a rescue turned into something neither of them planned, a connection born in chaos, a love that shouldn't exist, but did anyway. Because sometimes the most dangerous place to hide is in someone's heart. The TV was still on when the world shifted. It was a quiet Tuesday evening, rain tapping against the kitchen window, a pot of soup simmering on the stove. Aria Keller was folding laundry on the couch, her daughter Mila humming softly on the floor with her crayons. Nothing about that moment felt like the start of an ending. Then the breaking news alert cut through the room. Authorities are investigating a gruesome homicide discovered earlier today near the docks. The anchor's tone was steady, detached, but the images that flashed next made Aria's hands go cold. CCTV footage. A man's silhouette caught under a flickering streetlight. Broad shoulders, confident stride. A dark coat, and then that jacket. The one she knew by touch. Dark charcoal wool, custom-stitched. The left sleeve slightly uneven, because she had sewn it herself after the tailor got it wrong. Eli had laughed that night, kissed her forehead, and said, "That's why I married you. You fix everything I break." The room seemed to tilt. Aria's breath caught as she stepped closer to the TV, eyes locked on that blurred frame. The camera quality was poor, the man's face obscured by rain and shadow. But she didn't need his face. She knew the slope of those shoulders, the way he carried his hands, relaxed, almost elegant. It was her husband. Mila looked up. "Mommy?" Aria blinked fast, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Go to your room, sweetheart. Mommy needs to make a call." When the little girl disappeared down the hall, Aria turned back to the screen. The news replayed the footage, zooming in on the figure near the crime scene. A warehouse behind Pier 19, where police had found a man beaten to death and burned beyond recognition. Her stomach twisted. The voice in her head, the one she'd learned to ignore, whispered the question she didn't want to hear. What if this isn't the first time? She picked up her phone and dialed Eli. No answer. She called again. Still nothing. Then a message arrived, working late. "Don't wait up!" Her pulse quickened. Eli was supposed to be at an office dinner, one she had planned to attend, until he told her she should stay home with Mila. "It's boring," he'd said, smiling. "These people aren't your kind." Now she couldn't stop shaking. She remembered the bruises on his knuckles 2 nights ago, the faint scent of smoke on his jacket last week, the way he'd been quieter lately, not distant, but waiting. Her instincts screamed at her to run, but her mind refused to catch up. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe it wasn't him, maybe it was coincidence. But deep down, she already knew better. That night, when Eli came home, he looked almost too calm. His hair was damp from the rain, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, and his smile, warm, practiced, didn't quite reach his eyes. "You're still up?" he asked. "Yeah, I saw the news," she said carefully. The murder near the docks." Eli froze mid-step. It lasted less than a second, but Aria saw it, that flicker in his gaze before he smiled again. "Tragic," he murmured, pouring himself a drink. "People do horrible things." She swallowed hard. "The suspect?" They caught a glimpse on camera. He looked at her then, slowly, deliberately. "Did they?" "Yeah," she said, her voice unsteady. "Looked familiar." His lips twitched, not quite a smile. "You've been watching too many crime shows again, sweetheart." He walked closer, set his glass down beside her hand. His fingers brushed her wrist, too gently to be affectionate, too deliberate to be accidental. "You worry too much." But she couldn't look away from his sleeve, the uneven stitching on his left arm. That night, Aria didn't sleep. She lay awake beside him, listening to his breathing, memorizing every sound, the shift of fabric, the faint exhale when he turned. She realized that the man beside her wasn't a mystery anymore. He was the answer she didn't want to find. By morning, the house was quiet. Eli left early, claiming he had a meeting across town. The moment his car disappeared down the driveway, Aria went to his study, a room he'd always kept locked. Today, for the first time, he'd forgotten to take the key. She hesitated for half a heartbeat, then turned it. Inside, everything smelled faintly of cologne and metal. The curtains were drawn. On his desk sat a folder, marked with nothing but a red stripe. She opened it. Inside, photos, surveillance images, documents with unfamiliar names and numbers, and then in a picture of Simone Graves. Her friend, the caption underneath read, "Target under observation." Aria's breath hitched. Simone. The one who'd given her that folded note months ago. The note with the strange name CV and the words "No Mao" scrawled underneath. Suddenly, it made sense why Simone had been so nervous. Why she'd said, "If anything happens, don't call Eli." Aria's hand shook as she flipped through the rest. There were more names, more faces, and a photograph, one she recognized instantly. It was her and Mila, candid, taken from across the street, her smile frozen mid-laugh, Mila's small hand holding hers. Underneath, Eli had written in clean block letters, "Always mine." Her heart turned to ice. She didn't remember how long she stood there, only that when she finally moved, her body felt like it was made of glass. She packed a single duffel bag, clothes, Mila's favorite rabbit, her passport. Then she opened the drawer of the nightstand, pulled out the folded note Simone had given her, and stared at the faded ink. CV, debt unpaid. At that moment, she didn't even care who or what CV was. All she knew was that it wasn't Eli, and that was enough. By nightfall, the rain had returned, harder this time. The air carried that electric scent, the kind that comes before a storm big enough to wash the world clean. Aria moved fast. She dressed Mila in a coat, told her they were going on a little trip. The girl didn't ask questions. She trusted her mother completely. Aria buckled her into the back seat, started the car, and took one last look at the house that had been her dream once. Then the front door opened. Eli stood there, half silhouetted against the warm light inside, phone pressed to his ear. His eyes met hers across the rain. He didn't look surprised, just calm. Too calm. Aria's heart leapt into her throat. She slammed the accelerator. Tires screeched against the wet concrete as she sped down the street, her reflection flickering in every puddle like a ghost already gone. She drove for miles before stopping at a gas station off the old highway. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling as she pulled out the note again and dialed the number. 3 rings. A voice, low, steady, dangerous in its quiet. "Who gave you this number?" "Simone Graves," she whispered. A beat of silence. "Then where are you?" "Highway 19, near the diner with the broken sign." "Stay there. Don't move." The call ended. Minutes later, headlights cut through the rain. A black SUV stopped beside her. A man stepped out, tall and composed, rain beating on his coat. His eyes, gray, unreadable, locked onto hers through the glass. He didn't ask who she was. He just said one word, "Get out." And though every instinct told her not to trust a stranger in the dark, Aria Keller opened the door. Because sometimes the only thing scarier than running is staying. The night swallowed her whole. Aria Keller had been driving for hours, though the world outside never seemed to change. Just endless rain, black trees flashing by in the headlights, and the rhythmic thud of tires hitting puddles. Her knuckles were white against the steering wheel. She didn't dare look back, because she already knew what she'd see. Eli's car, the one she'd seen parked outside their house only minutes before the flames consumed it. He was following her. She pressed harder on the gas. The road ahead was empty, slick with water, glowing faintly under the dull orange streetlights. Mila stirred in the back seat, mumbling in her sleep. "Mommy, where are we going?" Aria swallowed her fear and forced her voice steady. "We're going somewhere safe, baby. Close your eyes, okay?" Mila nodded, half asleep again, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Safe. The word was starting to lose its meaning. In the rearview mirror, a flash of headlights appeared, far away but moving fast. Her stomach turned. No, she whispered, glancing around for a turnoff. There, a narrow road veering into the woods. She swerved, tires screeching on wet asphalt. Branches whipped against the windshield as she plunged into the darkness. The forest swallowed the sound of her engine, but her heart still beat loud enough to drown everything else. Behind her, faintly, a car engine echoed. Eli's. He would find her. He always did. Aria's breath hitched as she made another sharp turn, splashing through a shallow ditch. The car skidded steadied. She didn't care where the road led, only that it wasn't back to him. Her vision blurred from tears and exhaustion. The glow of her dashboard clock read 12:47 a.m. She needed help, not the police. Eli had friends everywhere. Not family. They'd never believe her. Then she remembered Simone, the one person who'd looked her in the eye months ago and said, "If he ever shows you who he really is, don't wait. Run." Simone had given her a folded note, almost like a joke at the time. On it, a single line, CV, debt unpaid, a phone number underneath. Aria reached for her bag, nearly dropping the phone as she dug through the clutter. Rain hammered the car roof, each drop like a ticking clock. Her fingers closed around the paper. She unfolded it, the ink slightly smudged from age. She hesitated for a heartbeat, because once she called, there was no going back. Then she dialed. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a voice, deep, steady, unhurried. "Who gave you this number?" For a second she couldn't answer. "Simone Graves," she said, voice trembling. A long pause. The faint crackle of static, the sound of rain on another line. Then the man spoke again. "Stay where you are. Don't get out of the car. Wait, who are you?" she blurted, panic sharp in her throat. But he had already hung up. The line went dead. She stared at the phone, breathing hard. The silence pressed in. All around her, the woods creaked and whispered with the storm. Her headlights caught nothing but trees, wet, glistening, unmoving. In the distance, thunder rolled low, long, and endless. Minutes crawled by. She checked the mirror again. No headlights, no sound. For a fleeting moment, she thought maybe Eli had lost her trail. She slumped forward, forehead against the steering wheel, her hands trembling so hard she could barely breathe. Then faintly, she saw it. 2 distant beams of light cutting through the trees, growing brighter with every second. Her pulse spiked. God, no. But as the lights came closer, she realized something. That wasn't Eli's car. It was too big, too smooth. The engine, when it stopped behind her, purred. Low, controlled, expensive. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Even through the rain, he looked impossibly composed. Tall, broad shoulders under a black coat that looked too clean for a night like this. His hair was damp, his jaw set. He walked toward her slowly, every movement deliberate, like he was giving her time to run. Aria's fingers hovered over the ignition, but she couldn't move. The man stopped by her window. He didn't knock, didn't shout. He just looked at her. Then his voice came calm and low. "Get out." She didn't move. His tone didn't change. But his eyes flicked briefly toward the dark road behind her. And that was when she heard it. Another engine in the distance. Faint but unmistakable. Eli. Her heart froze. The man noticed her fear and said quietly, "If you stay here, you die." That was enough. She unlocked the door, stepping out into the rain. The cold cut straight through her. The man didn't flinch. He was close now. Close enough that she could see the faint scar near his jawline, and the way his eyes, gray and unreadable, missed nothing. "Your name?" he asked. "Aria Keller. Your daughter?" "In the back seat," she said, glancing behind her. "Her name's Mila." He gave a small nod. "We move now. Wait, who are you?" He met her gaze. "Cassian Voss." Then he added, "And if you're calling me, you've already run out of choices." She wanted to argue, to ask 100 questions, but the sound of the second engine growing louder cut through everything. Cassian's eyes flicked up the road, assessing. He moved fast, walked to her car, opened the driver's door, and grabbed the small duffel bag from the passenger seat. "This all you have?" "Yes." He slung it over his shoulder, turned to her. "Take the child." Aria hurried to the back seat, gently lifting Mila, who stirred, blinking sleepily. "Mommy?" she murmured. "Shh, baby, we're leaving, okay?" The little girl nodded, pressing her face into Aria's neck. Cassian opened the back door of his SUV. "Get in." Aria hesitated. "Why are you helping me?" He looked at her, rain dripping from his lashes. "Because someone once helped me when I didn't deserve it." Then, without waiting for her response, he shut the door and moved around to the driver's side. Just as Aria settled Mila against her shoulder, headlights flared in the distance, a second car turning onto the narrow path. "Eli, go." She gasped. Cassian didn't need telling twice. The SUV roared to life, tires spitting mud as he swung it around, accelerating down the twisting forest road. The trees blurred past in streaks of black and silver. Behind them, the other car's lights grew smaller, then disappeared around a curve. But Aria knew better than to relax. Cassian's hands were steady on the wheel, his jaw tight. "He's not going to stop," he said flatly. "Is he?" She shook her head. "No." Cassian glanced at her through the dim light. "Then neither will I." They drove in silence for nearly an hour, the rain never letting up. Occasionally, Cassian checked the mirror, scanning the road behind. Aria sat still, every muscle tight. Mila slept again, her small hand gripping the fabric of Aria's jacket. Finally, Cassian slowed the car, turning off onto a smaller road that wound through the hills. "We'll stay here for the night," he said. "Where is here?" Aria asked, her voice hoarse. "Somewhere he doesn't know exists." The SUV rolled to a stop beside an old warehouse half hidden by trees. A single light glowed faintly inside. Cassian turned off the engine, then looked at her. "You'll be safe." For now, she didn't move. "You know him, don't you?" He exhaled through his nose. "Eli Ward isn't just a man, Aria. He's a business. He's the kind of problem people don't live long enough to report." Aria felt her stomach twist. "And you? What are you?" He looked at her for a long second. "The man people call when they're desperate enough to die or smart enough to run." She didn't know if that was supposed to comfort her. Cassian stepped out, rain misting around him. He came around and opened her door. "You need to rest." "The girl too," Aria hesitated. "Why are you doing this?" "Because Simone asked me to." His tone softened just slightly. "She saved me once. Told me if she ever disappeared, I'd know what to do." Aria's breath caught. "You mean she's gone?" Cassian didn't answer. That silence told her everything. He motioned toward the warehouse door. Inside, the air smelled faintly of oil and dust. There was a small cot, blankets, a space heater humming quietly. Cassian set her duffel bag down. "It's not much, but no one will find you here tonight." Aria sat on the edge of the cot, Mila asleep in her arms. The adrenaline was fading now, replaced by exhaustion and disbelief. "I don't even know you," she whispered. Cassian stood by the door, watching the rain blur the world outside. "You don't have to," he said. "You just have to stay alive." His voice was calm, but there was something in it, a heaviness that didn't belong to a stranger. Aria studied him in the dim light. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, those gray, storm-colored eyes, carried something she hadn't seen in anyone for a long time. Regret. When he finally turned to leave, Aria stopped him. "Cassian," she said quietly. He looked back. "If he finds me, what happens?" He didn't blink. "Then it's not me you should be afraid of." And with that, he closed the door, leaving her in the low hum of the storm. Outside, thunder rolled again, low and deep. Somewhere far away, Eli Ward's car cut through the night, headlights slicing the rain as he followed a trail no one else could see. For now, Aria Keller and her daughter were safe. But safety, she would soon learn, was only ever temporary. And the man who'd answered her call might just be the only thing standing between her and the monster she once called husband. By the time they reached Cassian's estate, dawn was only a pale bruise across the clouds. The rain had faded to mist, but the world still looked drowned. Trees dripping silver, gravel shining like glass. The SUV rolled through tall iron gates that opened without a sound. Aria watched from the window, her body tense. The place was enormous, dark stone, glass, and silence. The kind of house that didn't feel lived in, only guarded. Cassian parked beneath the archway and turned to her. "You can carry her inside. It's warm." Mila stirred in her arms as they stepped through the door. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and rain. Everything was precise, almost sterile. No family photos. No trace of life. Just control. "This is where you live?" Aria asked quietly. Cassian's voice was low. "Where I disappear." He led them through a corridor of tall windows and opened a guest room. "You can rest here. Food's in the kitchen. Clothes in the drawer. Lock the door if it helps." Aria hesitated. "Why are you helping us?" Cassian paused, eyes unreadable. "Because someone once helped me when I didn't deserve it." Then he walked away. When Aria woke hours later, the storm had dulled to a drizzle. Mila was still asleep, clutching her stuffed rabbit. For the first time in days, the world was quiet. Too quiet. She slipped out of bed and wandered through the hall. The mansion was endless. Glass, steel, muted light. Her reflection followed her across every surface. Then she saw it. A door slightly ajar at the end of the hall. Cassian's office. She hesitated, listening. No sound. Inside, the air smelled of oil and metal. On the desk, maps, files, and a half-burned photograph of Simone Graves. Beneath it, Aria spotted a blood-stained cloth folded beside a gun magazine. Her pulse quickened. She picked up the photo. Simone's smile was faint, frozen mid-laugh. On the back, a single note in Cassian's handwriting. "She warned me about you." Before she could process it, a voice came from behind her. "Looking for something?" She spun around. Cassian stood in the doorway, his sleeves rolled up, a faint bruise along his jaw. "I didn't mean to." He crossed the room, picked up the photo, and slipped it back into the drawer. "You should be resting." Aria's voice was sharp. "Who was she to you?" For a moment, his expression cracked. Someone who believed people could change. She was wrong. Later, in the kitchen, the smell of burnt pancakes filled the air. Mila sat on the counter, giggling as Cassian tried to flip another one. "You're terrible at this," Aria said, arms crossed. He didn't look up. "I'm better with things that don't burn." "Like weapons?" she asked. "Like secrets," he replied evenly. The room fell quiet for a beat. Mila popped a blueberry into her mouth, oblivious. Cassian poured her a glass of milk, his movements precise. "Your friend Simone." She knew Eli, worked with him once. Tried to stop him when things went bad. Aria frowned. "And you?" "I worked beside him too," Cassian admitted. "Until I realized he didn't just buy power. He built it out of people." Aria's stomach turned. "And now you're saving his wife?" He looked at her, eyes shadowed. "I'm saving his mistake." That night, after Mila had fallen asleep, Aria found Cassian in the library, sitting by the fire. Papers lay open beside him, old contracts, coded names. She stepped closer. "You keep saying you're not like him, but you both hide behind the same walls." Cassian's gaze lifted slowly. "Difference is, mine keep people out. His kept you in." For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the rain whispering against the glass. Aria finally asked, "Do you think he'll find us?" "Yes," Cassian said simply. "Men like him always do," she swallowed. "Then what happens?" He looked at her, the firelight catching the scar near his jaw. "Then I make sure he never touches you again." Aria studied him. The bruises, the exhaustion, the quiet conviction that didn't need words. And for the first time since the night she ran, she believed him. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly in the distance. Inside, two broken people sat in silence, not as savior and victim, but as survivors learning how to breathe again. The rain whispered against the windows, soft and steady. Aria sat across from Cassian, hands wrapped around a cup of untouched tea. The air between them was heavy, not with fear, but with everything unsaid. Cassian didn't push her to speak. He just sat there, quiet, a cigarette resting unlit between his fingers. The firelight caught the scar along his jaw. Finally, she said softly, 5 years ago, I thought love was supposed to save me. His gaze lifted. Patient. I met Eli at a hotel project in New York. He wasn't supposed to be there, said he was covering for a friend. But he made everyone laugh, made me feel like I was the only one in the room. He had that kind of charm that feels like gravity. Rain slid down the glass in slow streaks. Cassian said nothing, just turned the cigarette between his fingers. We dated for 6 months. He'd leave notes, flowers, call me sunshine. Her voice trembled. When he proposed in Central Park, it was snowing. I thought that was the universe giving me a sign. Cassian leaned forward slightly, his tone low. When did it stop feeling like love? The morning after the wedding, she whispered. He asked me to quit my job, said I didn't need to work anymore. Then came the cameras, the questions, the control. She looked up, meeting Cassian's eyes. He didn't yell. He didn't have to. He'd just smile and say I made him worry. Cassian's jaw flexed, the unlit cigarette still between his fingers. Control doesn't come from love, he said quietly. It comes from fear. Aria gave a hollow laugh. And I kept trying to make him love me harder, thinking if I did everything right, he'd stop. Her fingers tightened around the cup. Simone was the only one who noticed. She came over one night, said she could help me leave. Eli found out the next day. He didn't scream. He just smiled and slapped me once. Said it was my fault he had to. Cassian's eyes darkened. He finally lit the cigarette, the flame flickering briefly between them. Men like him don't lose control, he said. They plan it. Aria stared at the smoke curling upward. Every apology came with a gift, diamonds, dresses, trips. I called it love for too long. By the time I realized it was a cage, I'd already locked the door myself. The silence stretched. The rain outside turned heavier, like the sky was remembering with her. After a while, Cassian said, You ever hit back? She looked at him, startled. No, I didn't want to become like him. Cassian exhaled smoke, eyes fixed on the window. That's not weakness, Aria. That's the part of you he couldn't kill. For a long moment, they said nothing. Just the rain, the soft hum of the fire, and the sound of 2 broken lives trying to fit back into their own skin. Aria finally asked, You talk like you've known men like him. Cassian turned to her, and for the first time his voice lost its armor. I was one, she froze. He looked away, smoke trailing from his hand. Not like him, but close enough to hate myself for it. Aria set the cup down slowly. And now? Now I try to make sure no one else becomes who I used to be. She studied him, the quiet regret in his eyes, the tired way he breathed. Then she said softly, Maybe you already have. For a heartbeat, he looked like he might argue. Instead, he smiled, faint, broken. Don't give me that much credit. Outside, thunder rolled far away. Inside, silence filled the room again. Not heavy anymore, just fragile. For the first time in years, Aria Keller didn't feel completely alone. The storm that night came without warning. Wind howled through the trees surrounding the estate, bending the branches until they groaned like old bones. Thunder rolled somewhere in the distance, low and relentless. Inside the mansion, everything was quiet, too quiet, except for the sound of rain beating against the windows. Aria sat on the couch in the living room, a book open in her hands that she wasn't reading. Mila was asleep upstairs, safe behind a locked door. Cassian had told her the property was secure, that no one could get through the perimeter without his men knowing. But fear, she'd learned, didn't care about logic. It lived under the skin, waiting for the smallest sound to wake it. And then, it did. A loud bang echoed from outside, metal slamming against metal. The book dropped from Aria's hands before she even realized it. Her heart jumped into her throat, breath sharp and fast. For a second, she wasn't in the mansion anymore. She was back in the old house in Manhattan. Hearing the front door crash open, Eli's voice calling her name, that calm voice that always meant danger, her pulse raced. She stood up too quickly, knocking the chair backward, eyes darting to every shadow, every flicker of movement. Her chest tightened until she couldn't breathe. The next thing she knew, Cassian was there. He moved fast, not in panic, but with purpose. and caught her by the shoulders, just as she stumbled back against the wall. His voice was low, steady, cutting through the noise in her head. "Hey, Aria, look at me." She did, barely, her eyes wild, unfocused. "It's just the wind," he said. One of the gates slammed shut. "You're safe. No one's here." It took a few seconds before the words sank in. Slowly, her breathing steadied, the room coming back into focus. Cassian didn't move his hands right away. He waited, watching her chest rise and fall until she nodded faintly, signaling that she could stand on her own. Only then did he let go. "You've got the reflexes of someone who's lived through a war," he said quietly. Aria gave a shaky laugh, though her voice cracked. "I slept next to one for 5 years." Cassian said nothing. He just looked at her, really looked, and for once, she didn't see judgment in his eyes. Just understanding, the kind that doesn't need words. After a moment, he turned and walked toward the small bar in the corner of the room. The faint clink of glass was the only sound. He poured a drink, amber liquid catching the light, and placed it in front of her on the coffee table. "Drink," he said. "It won't erase the memory, but it'll slow your heartbeat." She hesitated, then took the glass. Her hand still trembled slightly, the reflection of the liquid rippling in the light. She took a sip. The burn hit first, then the warmth. For the first time in days, her fingers stopped shaking. "Thanks," she murmured. Cassian poured one for himself and sat across from her. He leaned back, elbows resting on his knees, the weight of exhaustion settling over him like an invisible coat. In that moment, Aria saw something she hadn't before. Not just strength, not just control, but weariness. The kind of weariness that comes from years of trying to atone for something unforgivable. She studied him quietly. "You've done bad things, haven't you?" He didn't look away. "So have you," Aria frowned. "I haven't killed anyone." Cassian's mouth curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "You don't have to pull the trigger to destroy something." The words hit deeper than she expected. Aria set her glass down, eyes falling to the floor. "You sound like someone who's already forgiven himself." Cassian's expression hardened. "Forgiveness isn't for people like me." Silence settled between them, thick but not uncomfortable. The rain outside softened, the storm beginning to drift east. A faint crackle from the fireplace filled the air, warm and steady. Aria leaned back into the couch, still holding the glass, the alcohol loosening the tension in her shoulders. "You know," she said quietly, "when I met Eli, I thought strength looked like control, like being the one who always had the answers. But it's not. Strength is letting go. I just didn't realize it until it was too late." Cassian looked at her over the rim of his glass. "You still think it's too late?" She thought for a long moment before shaking her head. "Maybe not, but I don't know who I am without the fear." His gaze softened, barely noticeable, but it was there. "You'll find out," he said. "Fear fades when it runs out of things to feed on." Aria met his eyes, and for a second, neither of them looked away. The silence changed then, no longer sharp or tense, but something quieter, steadier. Like two people learning how to exist in the same space without armor. She noticed how the firelight caught in the lines of his face, how the scar near his jaw shifted when he clenched his teeth. He looked less like the man who'd saved her, and more like one trying to save himself. "Why do you do it?" she asked softly. "All of this? The guns, the guards, the running?" Cassian exhaled slowly. "Because it's the only thing I know how to do right." "That's not true," she said, surprising even herself. "You knew how to save me." He looked at her then, the faintest flicker of emotion crossing his face. "You're not saved yet, Aria." "I know," she whispered. "But I'm still here." The fire crackled. Cassian turned his gaze back to the flames. "Sometimes that's enough." They sat there for a long time, the room quiet except for the soft hum of rain. Aria finished her drink, the warmth spreading through her chest. Cassian stayed silent, but his presence, solid, steady, felt like a wall between her and the world outside. For once, she didn't mind the silence. When she finally rose to leave, he caught her wrist gently, stopping her. "If you hear something again," he said, "don't freeze. Call my name. I'll be there." Aria looked down at his hand, then up at his face. His eyes, gray, storm-colored, were softer than she'd ever seen them. She nodded slowly. "Okay," he let go. That night, as she lay in bed beside Mila, Aria thought about his words, about the way his voice had changed when he said them. Quiet, careful, like a promise he wasn't sure he deserved to make. She didn't know if she trusted him completely. But for the first time in years, she trusted the space between them, the fragile peace that had formed from shared scars. Downstairs, Cassian sat alone by the dying fire, turning the empty glass in his hand. His reflection in the window looked almost like someone else, someone older, more haunted. He thought of Simone, of the night she'd said, "You can't save everyone, Cassian, but you can try to save someone." Maybe this was that moment. He set the glass down and leaned back, eyes closing as the storm faded into quiet. Upstairs, Aria finally fell asleep without dreaming of fire. And for a brief, fleeting hour, the house, for all its shadows and ghosts, felt almost like home. The night had gone still again. No rain this time, just the soft rustle of wind through the trees surrounding the estate. A deceptive calm that hid the truth Cassian already sensed. Peace never lasted. Not for men like him, and not when Eli Ward was still breathing. Inside the surveillance room, dim light from a dozen monitors flickered across Cassian's face. Each screen showed a different view. The perimeter fences, the drive leading into the woods, the rooms where Aria and Mila slept upstairs. Everything looked quiet, untouched. But Cassian knew that silence was just another way the world held its breath before violence. He adjusted the volume on the comms feed, listening to the low static of his security network. Nothing yet. That alone made him uneasy. Meanwhile, miles away in the city, Eli Ward sat in the back of a black sedan, cigarette burning between his fingers. The driver said nothing as Eli scrolled through the photo on his phone, a security still of Aria stepping out of Cassian's SUV. Her hair was wet, her arms wrapped around Mila. The timestamp read 03:14 a.m. His jaw tightened. "She's with him," he muttered. The man sitting beside him, bald, thick-necked, eyes like ice, leaned forward slightly. "You want her back alive?" Eli took a long drag from the cigarette, exhaled smoke that curled like a ghost. "Alive enough to remember who she belongs to." The hitman nodded. "And the girl?" Eli's eyes flicked toward him. "She's leverage. Don't touch her unless you have to." "Understood." Eli stubbed out the cigarette and gave a thin, sharp smile. "Cassian Voss thinks he can save people. Let's remind him what happens to saviors." He turned to the driver. "Tell your men, they move by sunrise." Back at the mansion, Cassian leaned over the desk, scrolling through encrypted messages on his tablet. One of them glowed in red. "Simone Graves, secure line active." He hesitated before answering. He hadn't spoken to Simone in over a year, not since the night she told him she was done with this world, that she was tired of playing both sides. But if anyone still had eyes in Eli's network, it was her. He pressed accept. The line clicked open with a faint hum. "Cassian Voss," came the voice, smooth, cool, carrying the faintest trace of irony. "Didn't expect to hear from you again." "Didn't expect to call," Cassian replied, tone flat. "But we both know I wouldn't unless it mattered." There was a small pause, the sound of her lighting a cigarette. "You always did have terrible timing." He leaned back in the chair. "You still running intel for the syndicate?" "That depends on who's asking." "I'm not here to buy information," Cassian said. "I'm here to confirm something. Eli Ward's moving again. I need to know how far he's gone." "Far enough to hire ghosts," Simone said simply. "The kind that don't miss." Cassian's eyes narrowed. "He's sending people after her?" You expected anything less? You took what's his, twice. He didn't answer right away. His reflection on the monitor looked cold, unrecognizable. I didn't take her. I pulled her out of a fire he lit. Simone exhaled smoke, the sound soft over the line. That's the problem, Cassian. You still think you can save the world from itself. She's not the world. That's what you said the last time, she shot back. And we buried 3 men because of it. Cassian's voice lowered, rougher now. Don't lecture me about the past. You chose your side. I chose to stay alive, she replied, tone sharp but tired. And I'm only talking to you now because I owe you one. Cassian was silent for a beat, then asked, What do you know? Simone hesitated. When she spoke again, her voice lost its edge. Eli Ward has a contract out, 7 figures. The target list has 2 names, Aria Keller and Mila Keller. His orders are clear. Bring them back or erase them if it gets messy. Cassian's grip tightened around the edge of the desk. He wouldn't hurt his own child. Wouldn't he? Simone said quietly. You know what power does to men like him. It's not about love anymore. It's about ownership. Cassian's jaw flexed, anger flashing like a blade beneath his calm exterior. He's making this personal. It's always been personal, Simone said. You think saving her changes what you were to him? You used to stand on the same side of the line. Cassian's voice dropped, quiet but sharp. Not anymore. Simone let out a faint laugh, though there was no humor in it. You once told me you were done with this life, that you'd washed your hands of blood. I did, he said simply. But the blood didn't wash off. For a moment, neither spoke. Only the faint crackle of static filled the silence, the sound of ghosts breathing through the wire. Finally, Simone said, Eli wants her back, and the child. If you keep them, you're declaring war on him. Cassian's answer was immediate, calm as the pull of a trigger. If he touches them, he's declaring war on me. Simone didn't argue. She just sighed. Then I hope you've still got enough fight left, because Eli's not the man you remember. He's worse. The line went dead. Cassian sat there for a long moment, staring at the darkened screen. His pulse was steady, but his mind was already moving, calculating routes, contingencies, escape plans. He'd built this place to be impenetrable, but no fortress was perfect. Sooner or later, Eli's men would find a way in. He needed to move Aria and Mila before that happened. Upstairs, he found Aria standing by the window in the guest room, gazing out into the fog. She turned when he entered. You heard something, she said, reading the tension in his face. He nodded once. Eli's looking for you. Her breath caught. How close? Too close for comfort. She swallowed, clutching the edge of the window frame. What does he want, Cassian? Why won't he just let us go? Cassian hesitated, because he doesn't see you as a person. He sees you as a belonging that slipped away. And men like him don't lose things quietly. Aria's eyes filled with fear, but there was something else too, anger. Then we fight. Cassian looked at her, surprised. You're not a soldier. Neither was I a victim, she said firmly. But he made me one. I won't let him do the same to my daughter. For a second, Cassian saw something in her, something fierce, unbroken. He'd seen it before, in the faces of people who'd survived the impossible. He gave a small nod. Good. You'll need that. Aria frowned. You think we can really stop him? Cassian's gaze drifted to the window. Stopping him isn't the goal. Surviving him is. Downstairs, one of the security alarms gave a faint buzz. Not a breach, just movement near the perimeter. Cassian turned, alert. He moved to the control panel, scanning the feed. Nothing visible, just the faint shimmer of motion in the trees. But instinct told him they were already being watched. He grabbed his earpiece. Unit 1, sweep the east perimeter. No lights. A voice crackled back. Copy that. Cassian stood there for a long moment, then looked back at Aria. Pack essentials. No noise. We might need to move before dawn. Aria nodded, her expression tightening with resolve. What about Mila? I'll carry her myself. Where will we go? Somewhere even he won't expect, Cassian said, his tone turning cold again, the tone of the man he used to be, the one who'd walked through fire and come out harder. He thinks I'm hiding. He's wrong. By the time the first light of dawn crept over the tree line, the estate was ready, escape routes mapped, guards positioned, vehicles prepped. Cassian stood in the main hall, checking his weapon, every movement precise. The world outside was waking, but the air inside was thick with tension. Aria came down the stairs, Mila in her arms. The child's small hand clutched the stuffed rabbit tightly, her sleepy eyes confused. Are we leaving again? She whispered. Yes, Aria said softly. Just for a while. Cassian met her gaze, giving a brief nod. You'll both be safe, I promise. Aria looked at him, searching his face. You don't make promises easily, do you? No, he said, but I keep the ones I make. She didn't answer, just held his eyes for a moment longer, long enough for something unspoken to pass between them. Trust, fear, maybe even faith. Outside, engines roared to life. Cassian motioned her toward the SUV. The sky was pale, streaked with the first blush of morning. But in the distance, unseen beyond the hills, another engine started too, smoother, quieter, moving in the same direction. Eli Ward was coming, and this time, he wasn't sending a message. He was bringing a war. The house was too quiet that night, the kind of silence that hummed before breaking. Aria couldn't sleep. The air felt wrong, heavy with something unspoken. Rain had returned, soft against the glass, whispering secrets only the dark could hear. She rose carefully, not to wake Mila, and stepped into the hall. At the far end, Cassian's office door stood half open, a faint light spilling through the crack. She meant only to ask if they were leaving at dawn, until she heard voices. Cassian's voice, low, tense. You should have told me earlier, Simone. A pause, then a familiar tone through the speaker. Simone's voice. And you should have stayed out, Cassian. You don't get to play the hero now. Aria froze, her pulse quickened. I'm not playing anything, Cassian said. I just need to know if the target's still contained. Simone's tone sharpened. Listen to yourself. You talk about her like an asset, just like before. Because that's how Eli sees her, he snapped. And if I don't think like him, I'll never stop him. Silence stretched. Then Simone's voice came quieter, bitter. You were both the same once. You built the same empire. You just called it redemption instead of power. Aria's blood turned cold. The same once, Simone continued, almost whispering. You think she'll forgive you when she finds out? That you armed Eli Ward, that you helped build the cage she lived in? Aria's heart dropped. Cassian didn't deny it. He just said, hoarse, I can't erase what I did, but maybe keeping her alive will mean something. The line went dead. For a long moment, Aria stood frozen, the hum of static still in her ears. Then the numbness shattered into anger. She pushed the door open. Cassian turned. His eyes widened slightly. Aria, don't! She cut in, her voice trembling. Don't say my name like that. He stepped forward slowly, cautious. You shouldn't have been listening. I had to, she said, tears threatening to spill. Because nothing about this ever made sense. And now I know why. Let me explain. Explain what? She snapped. That you worked with him? That you helped create him? Cassian's face was tight, controlled. Yes, I did. But not anymore. She laughed, A hollow, broken sound. You sound just like him when you say that. I'm not Eli. No, she said, voice cracking. You just helped him become who he is. He didn't flinch. You think I don't see that every time I close my eyes? You think I don't hear the screams I helped fund? He stepped closer, voice low. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Aria. I'm asking you to live long enough to hate me later. The words hit her harder than she wanted to admit. For a second, anger wavered, replaced by the kind of heartbreak that doesn't make a sound. I can't stay here, she whispered. Cassian's expression faltered. If you walk out that door, he'll find you. He'll take you back. Then I'll die trying to stop him, she said quietly. He exhaled, defeated. Then maybe you're more like me than you think. Aria turned away before her voice could break. She packed Mila's things with shaking hands. Each zipper, each folded shirt sounded like an ending. From the doorway came a small voice. Mommy? Mila rubbed her eyes, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Are we leaving again? Yes, baby, Aria said softly. We have to, but what about Cassian? Aria hesitated, forcing a smile. He's not who we thought he was. Mila hugged the rabbit tighter. But he saved us, Aria's throat closed. I know, sweetheart. But sometimes even the people who save us aren't safe to stay with. Minutes later, she led her daughter downstairs. Cassian was waiting by the fire, his face shadowed, eyes unreadable. He didn't try to stop her. He already knew. I can't stay, she said. He nodded once. I figured. Mila slipped from her mother's hand and walked up to him. Cassian froze, uncertain. Mommy gets scared at night, Mila whispered. Can you watch her for me? Cassian swallowed hard. I'll make sure no one hurts her. Or you. Aria couldn't speak. For a heartbeat, she saw the man behind the guilt. Not the soldier, not the sinner, just the quiet sadness he never let show. You don't have to save me, she said finally. Cassian's answer was barely a whisper. Maybe I need to. She turned away before he could see the tears. The door opened, the cold night rushing in. Behind her, Cassian stood alone by the dying fire. He whispered to the empty room, I already failed once, Simone. I won't fail again. Outside, engines growled in the distance, faint, predatory. Eli Ward was closer than either of them knew. The meeting was set for midnight. A storm was rolling in from the east, thick clouds crawling across the horizon, swallowing the moonlight. The old warehouse on the edge of the industrial district stood like a carcass of another time, its walls rusted, its windows blackened. It was the kind of place where ghosts went to remember what they once were. Cassian arrived first. He parked the car 2 blocks away, walked the rest of the distance with his coat collar turned up, his steps silent against the gravel. His gun was holstered under his jacket, but his hand never strayed far from it. Inside, the air smelled of oil and rain. Every sound echoed, each drip from the ceiling, each step against the concrete. He stopped near the center, where a single light bulb swung lazily from the ceiling, flickering every few seconds. The flicker matched the rhythm of his pulse. He didn't have to wait long. The creak of metal doors broke the silence, followed by footsteps, confident, unhurried. Eli Ward entered the room like a man who owned it. He was dressed in black, his hair slicked back, his expression calm. But his eyes, that cold, predatory calm, carried the same darkness Cassian had once seen reflected in himself. Eli smiled faintly, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. You've changed, Cassian. I almost didn't recognize you without the blood on your hands. Cassian didn't move. Maybe I learned to wash it off. Eli's gaze drifted around the warehouse. I used to like this place. We closed our first deal here, remember? Russian arms, $1 million shipment. You called it the start of an empire. That empire's built on graves, Cassian said evenly. Eli chuckled. And now you're what? A guardian angel. You think you can erase what we did by saving one broken woman and her kid? Cassian's jaw tightened. She's not part of your game anymore, Eli. Let her go. Eli's expression darkened. You think you can take what's mine and walk away? That woman belongs to me. Cassian stepped closer, voice low but sharp as a blade. She doesn't belong to anyone. Eli tilted his head, amused. You talk like you've never bought a soul before. But I remember you. The deals you made, the lives you traded. You built your redemption on the same bones I did. Cassian's silence said more than words. Eli smirked, circling him slowly. Tell me, what's the difference between you and me? Cassian finally met his eyes. I stopped pretending it made me strong. Eli's laughter echoed through the hollow space. You always did like to dress up your guilt with pretty words. You could have stayed free, you know. I made sure of that. Cassian's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Eli's grin widened. You think I forgot? 10 years ago. That warehouse in Kiev. You shot a diplomat's son during a weapons exchange gone wrong. I covered it up. I paid off the witnesses, burned the reports, made sure your name disappeared. You owe me your life. Cassian's fists clenched. I didn't ask for that. But you took it, Eli said softly. You took your freedom, your second chance. And now you're here, turning on me because of what? Some broken designer who cried in your arms? A woman who doesn't even know who you are? Cassian's voice dropped to a growl. She knows enough. Eli stepped closer, their faces inches apart. You're throwing away everything for her. Cassian's gaze didn't waver. Not for her. For what she made me remember. Eli's brows furrowed slightly. And what's that? Cassian's answer came quiet but firm. That I still have a choice. For a moment, Eli said nothing. Then he laughed, a sharp, humorless sound that echoed through the metal walls. A choice? You think walking away makes you clean? You think saving her will save you? No one walks away from what we built, Cassian. Not even me. Cassian took a slow step back, his voice calm but cold. That's where you're wrong. I already did. Eli's eyes flickered just briefly, a flash of something beneath the arrogance. You think you can protect her? That child? You can't even protect yourself. You're not a savior, Cassian. You're a shadow pretending to stand in the light. Cassian reached into his coat. Not for his gun, but for the silver flask he carried. He unscrewed it, took a slow sip, then set it down on a rusted crate between them. You're right, he said. I'm no savior, but I'm done being the monster that makes men like you sleep easy. Eli's smile faded. So what now? You gonna shoot me? Not tonight, Cassian said. If I wanted you dead, I wouldn't have come alone. Eli's gaze sharpened. Then why are you here? To make sure you understand something. Cassian stepped closer again, his voice barely above a whisper. If you come near her, or the girl, you're not starting a hunt. You're starting a war. Eli stared at him for a long moment, then smiled again, slow and venomous. You've always had a talent for dramatics. But let's not forget, I built you. And I can end you. Cassian's expression didn't change. You didn't build me, Eli. You broke me. There's a difference. Eli leaned in, his voice almost gentle. And yet you still bleed the same. Cassian's reply came like a knife sliding between ribs. Maybe. But at least I bleed for something that matters now. The two men stood there in silence, two ghosts from the same graveyard, staring at each other through years of blood and betrayal. Finally, Eli stepped back, the faintest smirk curling at his lips. You think that little girl will save you. But when this ends, Cassian, she'll know exactly who you are. And when she looks at you, she'll see me. Cassian's eyes darkened, his voice a whisper of steel. Then I'll make sure she learns the difference. Eli turned, heading toward the door. The echo of his footsteps lingered long after he was gone. Cassian stayed still, staring at the flask left between them, the reflection of the swinging light trembling across the metal surface. He picked it up, twisted the cap shut, and slipped it back into his coat. The storm outside broke then. Wind slamming against the walls, rain pouring in sheets. He stood there for another minute, letting the noise drown out the thoughts clawing at the back of his mind. Then he walked toward the exit, his voice low, almost a whisper meant for no one. You saved my life once, Eli, but that debt's paid in full. As he stepped into the rain, thunder rolled overhead. Both men knew the next time they met, there would be no more words, only the sound of gunfire and the ending they'd been walking toward for years. The rain returned that night, heavy, merciless, pounding against the windows of the mansion like a warning from the heavens. The air outside buzzed with static, electricity crackling in the clouds, the smell of wet soil and gun oil already thick in the air. Cassian Voss stood in the surveillance room, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the monitors. The night vision feed flickered in hues of green and black. Through the trees, he saw it, movement. Dozens of them. Eli had come. He didn't flinch. He'd been expecting this. He grabbed the radio and spoke, his tone calm but sharp. All units, they're here. Code black. Defensive positions. Non-lethal on first contact, unless they shoot first. A chorus of quiet affirmations crackled back through the static. Cassian shut the radio off, holstered his weapon, and moved through the dark hallway toward the guest wing. His steps were measured, but inside, his pulse had begun to quicken. When he opened the door, Aria was already sitting up in bed. She must have sensed it too. Her eyes were wide, hands gripping the sheets. "What's happening?" He didn't waste words. "They found us. Take Mila, now." Her breath hitched. "Eli, yes." In 3 strides, he was at her side, grabbing the emergency pack from under the bed, the one he'd prepared days ago. "Downstairs," he ordered. "The basement. Don't open the door for anyone but me." Aria obeyed, clutching Mila against her chest, the little girl still half asleep, confused by the fear in her mother's voice. Cassian led them through the narrow hallway, past the kitchen, to a small metal door hidden behind a shelf. He entered a code, the lock clicked, and the steel door opened to a stairwell leading down into darkness. The basement was soundproofed, reinforced. A panic room disguised as storage. Cassian switched on a single light bulb. The faint hum filled the silence. "You stay here," he said. "No noise. No movement," Aria's voice trembled. "Cassian, I'll handle it," he cut her off. "If I don't come back, there's a tunnel behind that cabinet. It leads out into the woods." Her eyes glistened. "You can't fight them all." "I don't need to. I just need to make sure he never reaches you." Before she could reply, he turned and shut the door. The lock clicked, sealing her in darkness. Above ground, the mansion lights flickered as the power grid shifted to backup. Outside, headlights cut through the fog, engines roared, and then the first gunshot cracked the night. Cassian moved through the main hall with silent precision. He took position behind the marble column near the front entrance and waited. The first of Eli's men breached the gate. Black uniforms, suppressed rifles, night vision goggles. They fanned out like wolves in formation, boots splashing through puddles, hand signals flashing in the dark. Cassian waited until the lead man stepped over the threshold and fired once. A clean headshot. The body fell before the others could react. Then the storm began. Gunfire erupted, deafening inside the stone corridors. Bullets tore through walls, glass shattered, alarms wailed. Cassian moved like a phantom, quick, efficient, deadly. Every motion was practiced, every shot deliberate. He took down 3, then 5, then ducked as rounds slammed into the wall behind him. Sparks flew from shattered light fixtures. He slid across the floor, firing under the cover of smoke. One man dropped near the staircase. Another tried to flank but was met with a knife to the throat. The air smelled of cordite and blood, and still, they kept coming. Cassian reloaded, ducked behind the overturned table in the dining hall, and radioed his last standing guard. "East side clear." A pause, then static, then nothing. He swore under his breath. Downstairs, Aria sat on the cold floor, clutching Mila to her chest. The girl had buried her face against her mother's shoulder, her small fingers trembling. Every muffled explosion above them made Aria flinch. She bit her lip until she tasted blood, her tears falling silently. The sound of gunfire drew closer, then stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, footsteps. Aria froze. Heavy, slow, deliberate footsteps, descending the stairs. The lock on the door rattled once. "No," she whispered. The door creaked open, and the shadow filled the frame. Eli Ward stepped into the light. He looked immaculate even in ruin, his black coat damp from the rain, his face calm, controlled, that same unnerving stillness that had haunted her dreams. He held a gun in his hand, pointed casually toward the floor. "Hello, Aria," he said softly. She backed away, shielding Mila behind her. "Don't come any closer." He tilted his head, studying her. "It's funny. You always used to tell me I didn't scare you, and yet here you are shaking. Because I know what you are, she spat. Eli smiled faintly. You think Cassian's any different? You think he doesn't have blood on his hands? At least I never pretended to be a hero, her voice cracked. He never chained me, never watched me through cameras, never hit me because I breathed wrong. Eli's smile faltered, replaced by something colder. He can't protect you forever, Aria. Men like him, men like me, we burn everything we touch. He'll leave you broken just like I did. It's what we are. She shook her head, tears streaking her face. No, you're what you choose to be. His expression softened for a brief second, a flicker of something almost human. Then it vanished. He raised the gun. I warned you. You should have stayed mine. The air seemed to stop. The world narrowed to the click of his safety being released. And then, another sound. A sharp, deafening gunshot tore through the silence. Eli's body jerked forward, his gun clattering to the floor. For a moment he stood there swaying, his expression frozen in disbelief. Then he turned slightly, eyes wide. Cassian stood in the doorway behind him, gun smoking in his hand, eyes cold as winter. Eli staggered, pressing a trembling hand to his stomach where the blood was already spreading. He gave a hollow laugh. You always were the better shot. Cassian said nothing. Eli stumbled, dropping to his knees. You think she'll love you for this? You think she'll forgive you for being what you are? His breath hitched, blood pooling beneath him. You think I'm a monster, Aria. He turned his gaze toward her, eyes wet, voice breaking. But I did love you. That's the truth. For a heartbeat, everything went still. Aria stood frozen, her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Cassian looked at the dying man in front of him, the echo of what he could have become. Then his voice came, low and steady. And that, he said, is how monsters love. Eli's eyes flickered, then went still. The gun slipped from his grasp. Silence reclaimed the room. Cassian lowered his weapon slowly, breathing hard. The smell of gunpowder hung thick in the air. He turned toward Aria, who was still trembling, clutching Mila. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Cassian holstered his gun and took a step forward. It's over, he said quietly. Aria looked at him, at the man who had saved her, at the same man who once shared blood with the monster on the floor. And for the first time, she didn't know whether to thank him or fear him. Cassian looked down at Eli's lifeless body, then turned away, his voice low, almost to himself. There's always a price. Outside, thunder rolled again, long and distant. The rain fell harder, washing away the blood that seeped under the door, carrying it into the earth, as if the storm itself wanted to bury what had just happened. For a moment, none of them moved. Then Cassian looked back at Aria and said softly, Get Mila upstairs. She shouldn't see this. And as she led her daughter away, Cassian stood alone in the basement, surrounded by the echo of violence and the ghost of a man who once saved his life, knowing that the war was finally over. But peace, for men like him, was never more than a pause between storms. Dawn broke slowly that morning. The rain had stopped, leaving the mansion wrapped in a still, fragile silence, as if the world itself was afraid to breathe. Smoke lingered faintly in the air, and the scent of gunpowder clung to the walls like a ghost that refused to leave. Cassian Voss stood by the shattered window in the study, staring out into the gray horizon. His hands were steady, but his eyes looked years older. The night had taken something from him, something he wasn't sure he'd ever get back. Down the hall, Aria sat on the couch holding Mila close, the little girl finally asleep against her chest. There was peace in that image, but also a quiet ache. He watched them for a long moment, the corners of his lips tightening, not quite a smile, not quite sorrow. Then he turned and made the call. The voice on the other end was calm, official. Detective Monroe, who is this? Cassian's tone was low, composed. Cassian Voss, I'm at the Voss estate. There's a body here. Eli Ward. You'll want to send a team. A pause. Mr. Voss, are you saying... I'm saying I'm responsible, he interrupted. He hung up before they could ask anything else. When he turned back, Aria was standing in the doorway. Her face was pale, her eyes searching his. "You don't have to do this," she said, her voice trembling. Cassian shook his head. "Yes, I do." She took a step closer. "It was self-defense. He came here to kill us. You saved our lives." "I also pulled the trigger," he replied quietly. "There's no saving a man like me without paying for what I've done." Aria's hands clenched at her sides. "You've already paid. Every day you've lived with it." He looked at her, really looked. And for the first time in a long while, his expression softened. "You don't understand. I spent years running from what I was. Eli wasn't wrong about everything. We were both monsters once. The only difference is, I got the chance to stop." Her voice broke. "And now you're throwing that chance away." Cassian stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His touch was gentle, almost hesitant. "I'm not throwing it away. I'm making sure you and Mila keep yours." Outside, faint sirens began to rise in the distance, a low, steady wail cutting through the morning fog. Aria shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Cassian, please." He smiled faintly, that quiet, tired smile she'd come to know. "Aria, if anyone asks who I am, just tell them." He paused, his voice barely a whisper. "A man who kept his promise." She choked on a sob. "What promise?" His gaze lingered on her, on Mila still asleep in her arms, on the life he'd never have. To make sure she grows up in a world where monsters don't win. The sirens were closer now. Red and blue lights flickered through the cracks in the curtains. Cassian stepped back, straightened his coat, and turned toward the door. Aria wanted to stop him, to scream, to beg. But something in his eyes, that quiet peace, told her she couldn't. When the police entered minutes later, they found him standing on the porch, hands raised, weapon already placed on the ground. He didn't resist, didn't explain. Inside, through the broken window, Aria watched as they led him away. The morning sun broke through the clouds just then, casting a thin beam of gold across the wet earth, a fragile promise of something new. Cassian didn't look back. But as the car door closed and the convoy disappeared down the road, Aria whispered to herself through her tears, the words he'd left behind. He kept his promise. 3 months later, the world had a different color. Aria and Mila lived in a small rental on the Oregon coast, a place that smelled of salt and pine and had more gulls than neighbors. The house was modest, white clapboard, a crooked fence, a porch that caught the breeze. But to Aria, it felt impossibly large compared with the cold rooms of the mansion or the sterile confines of the basement. Mornings here meant coffee that tasted like a promise, and a daughter who learned to run along the shoreline with bare feet, and a laugh that chased the gulls away. Aria watched Mila build sand forts and collect smooth stones, and each ordinary moment stitched something back into her that Eli had tried to tear apart. Sleep came easier. The nightmares came less often. The panic that had once lived under her skin was now an occasional visitor, arriving only in the small hours and leaving before the sun rose. Still, the past had a way of being patient. One late afternoon, with storm clouds low and the tide pulling out, a plain envelope slid under the rental's front door. There was no return address, no stamp, just her name in a hand she didn't recognize, and a small smear of sand clinging to the corner. Inside was a single line of paper and one photograph. The note read, "I kept my promise." The photograph was taken from a distance, 2 figures on a beach, a woman and a child playing near the surf, unaware of the camera. In the lower corner of the print, Cassian's handwriting was tiny and neat, for when you wondered if ghosts are real. Aria's first reaction was a cold shock, like someone turning a key in a lock she'd thought long sealed. Her thumbs trembled as she smoothed the photo out on the kitchen table, watching Mila chase a crab across the sand through the glass. The image was impossible to dismiss. The shape of her coat, the tilt of the head, details that only someone who'd watched them up close would notice. For a day, she could not focus. She tried the sensible things first, searching news archives, calling numbers she'd been given, even checking the public records out of a stubborn need to reconcile the world she was living in with the one she'd fled. Officially, reports in a few regional outlets had declared Cassian dead in custody, a neat headline that had circulated after the arrests and the confusion that followed Eli's fall. There were paperwork summaries and an obituary notice someone had written with clinical finality. The system had closed the case and moved on, but the photograph and the note refused to obey the neatness of files. They suggested another truth, that Cassian could outmaneuver even the machinery that tried to pin him down, that he could make himself into whatever story would best keep Aria and Mila safe. Anger surfaced beside gratitude like two tides meeting. She found herself furious at him for disappearing into any story that ended with her thinking he was gone, for choosing secrecy over a chance to say goodbye, for making her mourn a life she hadn't been allowed to understand. At the same time, something raw and tender opened in her chest, relief so sharp it hurt, because the knowledge that he was alive meant the promise had been kept in the only way that mattered. They were safe. That evening, while Mila slept, Aria sat on the porch with the photograph spread across her knees and watched the ocean chew at the horizon. She traced the grain of the sand in the picture with a fingertip, as if the texture might reveal how close the world still was. She thought of Cassian's eyes the night he'd handed himself in, the steady way he'd said the things she'd repeat now. "If anyone asks who I am, say, I kept my promise." The words landed differently, seen in ink and photo, than they had when breathed into a corridor of an empty house. She folded the photograph carefully and slid it into the back pocket of her wallet, where it pressed against her license like a secret companion. In the days that followed, Aria let herself build small rituals: a Thursday trip to the market, a Saturday morning pancake that always burned the first one, a bedtime story read in two voices. She didn't write back to the anonymous sender. Part of her wanted to leave the gift of mystery intact, to hold the knowledge without the obligation to unravel it. Yet at night, alone, she would sometimes stand on the wet sand and whisper to the wind, a private vow edged with something like apology and gratitude. "Thank you. But I wish you'd stayed," the sea answered with a soft, patient roar. And for the first time in a long while, Aria allowed herself to breathe as if the air belonged to her. The night cracked open with thunder. Cassian stood by the window, watching headlights crawl up the hill. Dozens of them, black SUVs slicing through the dark like teeth. He'd known Eli would come. He just hadn't expected it so soon. From the hallway, Mila's soft footsteps echoed. Aria appeared behind her, still in the same sweater from the night before, her face pale but steady. "He's here, isn't he?" she said. Cassian didn't answer. He only handed her a small flash drive. "Take Mila. Use the tunnel beneath the cellar. Don't stop until you see the old chapel. There's a man waiting there. You can trust him." Aria stared at the drive. "What's on this?" "Proof," he said quietly. "Everything Eli's done. Every name, every deal. It's enough to end him if you live long enough to deliver it." She shook her head. "You're coming with us." Cassian's eyes softened. "Someone has to make sure they don't follow." The first explosion shattered the glass. Aria ducked, pulling Mila close. Cassian was already moving, calm, efficient, like a man who'd rehearsed his own death 1,000 times. He met her gaze once more. "Go, Aria. Don't let my past become her future." The tunnel smelled of damp earth and oil. Aria half ran, half carried Mila through the narrow passage. Behind them, the house above shook with gunfire. The echoes followed like ghosts. Mila whispered, "Is he coming?" Aria hesitated. "He'll find us." She didn't believe it, but she had to say it out loud. When they reached the exit hatch, she turned back, just for a second, and saw smoke rising through the cracks of the floorboards. Upstairs, Cassian moved through the firelit chaos with precision. The air was thick with smoke and gunpowder. Shadows danced along the walls as Eli's men flooded the halls. Eli entered last, immaculate in his black suit, a serpent among flames. "Cassian Hale," he drawled. "I wondered how long you'd keep pretending to be the good man." Cassian reloaded, jaw tight. "And I wondered when you'd stop pretending to be one." Eli laughed, calm and cruel. "Do you know what separates you and me?" Cassian fired a single shot. The bullet grazed Eli's shoulder, spinning him backward. "I don't care," Cassian said. Eli grinned through the pain. "Still protecting her, I see. The woman you helped destroy." "How poetic!" Cassian lunged forward, striking him hard. They struggled, two ghosts of the same sin, fighting not for survival, but for redemption neither deserved. Eli shoved him against the wall, snarling, "You think she'll forgive you?" "She'll hate you till she dies." Cassian's reply was quiet, almost tender. "As long as she's alive to hate me, I can live with that." He pulled the pin from the grenade clipped to his vest. Eli's eyes widened. "Cassian, goodbye. Partner." The explosion swallowed the house in a roar of white fire. Hours later, dawn broke over the ruins. Aria stood on the hill above what remained of the mansion, the flash drive clutched in her hand. The air smelled of ash and rain. Mila held her hand tightly, staring at the smoke curling into the sky. "Is he gone?" Aria nodded slowly. "Yes. But he made sure we weren't." A car approached. The man Cassian had mentioned stepped out, tall gray coat, quiet eyes. "You're Aria Keller," he said. Cassian sent word. She handed him the drive. "Make it count," he nodded. He already did. As the man left, Aria turned back toward the horizon. The fire had faded to smoke, the last light of dawn breaking through. For a long time, she just stood there, feeling the ache of survival. That strange mixture of grief and grace. Mila tugged her sleeve. "Mommy?" "Yes, baby." "Do people become angels when they're good?" Aria smiled faintly, her eyes wet. "Sometimes, and sometimes they just stop running." She looked up at the sky, gray, quiet, endless, and whispered, "Rest, Cassian." Then she turned, took Mila's hand, and walked toward the rising sun. Thank you so much for listening until the end of today's story. If Aria and Cassian's journey touched your heart, don't forget to leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next stories. Your support means the world. It's what keeps these stories alive.